Once upon a time, the entire world conspired to make the perfect sedan. It was designed by an Italian who was obsessed with safety. It was engineered by Germans who were infatuated with fuel economy. It had a Le Mans winning V8, strangely because the Japanese had just finally arrived in America. And it was so fat, it didn't fit down its own production line. So it needed to be hand-built by rivals across town. It was the Mercedes-Benz 500e, and it is the world's most perfect sedan. By the mid-1970s, Mercedes had twice put an unconscionably large V8 in its S-Class. The first was 6.3 liters of "shut up, hippie." The second was a 6.9-liter middle finger issued right in the middle of a fuel crisis. And yet, despite these childish acts of defiance, Mercedes' image remained old and stodgy. Ironically, that very fuel crisis sent Mercedes into an existential tailspin that resulted in twins. The subcompact W201 and compact W124 sedans rescued Mercedes from the past and catapulted it to defining the future of the automobile. Thanks to looming US fuel economy regulations, Mercedes threw its entire engineering might behind its compact twins, which would also use a new family of fuel-efficient 4, 5, and 6-cylinder engines. And then Mercedes found an Italian to make them look like the future. Bruno Sacco's design was revolutionary, though it may not look it now because every sedan since has been modeled after these cars. Integrated bumpers, flush headlights, taillights on the body with a trunk opening that dipped below them. It also had a wedge-shaped high trunk lid for aerodynamics. And something else, its rear was tapered like a teardrop. It may look like an upright square box to the eye, but not to the air. With a coefficient of drag as low as 0.26, the W124 is one of the most aerodynamically efficient sedans of all time. This was designed in the 1970s. These cars looked like spaceships when they debuted because everything else on the road looked like this. The thing about Bruno Sacco is that he had just come from Mercedes' safety department. So while his stated goal was to create a design that would stay relevant for 3 decades, his actual target was at the confluence of design, efficiency, and safety. So Sacco's cars included innovations like the mesmerizing articulating single wiper. It covered a record-breaking 86% of the windshield, but its arm stayed parallel to the airflow at all times so the blade didn't lift off the glass on the Autobahn. And ribbed taillights designed so that they still transmit light when they're covered with snow or mud. And rear headrests that drop down at the press of a button so you didn't back over your neighbor's kid by accident. By the end of the 1980s, Mercedes was basking in its huge success, with yuppies everywhere fawning all over their expensive, over-engineered status symbols. But with the new decade came a new crisis, and its name was Lexus. Lexus stunned the world with a flagship that was, in almost all respects, better than the Mercedes S-Class, and it cost half as much, less even than the 6-cylinder 300e. Poof! There went a quarter of Mercedes-Benz US sales overnight. A desperate plea came in from Mercedes North America.
Hey Krauts, throw a V8 in that thing or we're never gonna be able to sell another one.
Good idea. But remember, this was a fuel crisis vehicle. It was designed for skinny little 4, 5, and 6-cylinder engines. And Mercedes' obsession with safety meant the frame rails were placed close to the center of the engine compartment to protect you in an offset crash. Way ahead of its time, but a big wide V8 was never gonna fit.
And with Mercedes engineers so busy trying to figure out how to beat Lexus with the next S-Class, they just didn't have the time to mess with the old 124.
But you know who did? Porsche. 3 things to remember. Porsche and Mercedes are both headquartered in Stuttgart. They're like walking distance away from each other. See?
Secondly, Porsche was in huge trouble with US sales down by almost 90%. They were desperate for money and work.
And third, Porsche has an engineering consulting service. So Mercedes walked right over and hired Porsche to fit the new Mercedes V8
into the 124. Porsche engineering would be responsible for widening the front frame rails to make room, reinforcing the firewall and structure to deal with the extra power, moving the front seats further apart to fit the exhaust down the new wider transmission tunnel, and then doing the side impact crash testing. Meanwhile, the new V8, codenamed M119, had just made its production car debut in the 500 SL, and then immediately won the 24 Hours of Le Mans. The 1989 Sauber C9 used a twin-turbo 925 horsepower version of that engine, and it took first, second, and fifth places in that race. Mercedes tested the engines after the endurance race and found out that not only did they make more power after the race than they did before, they showed negligible wear. You can't make this stuff up. Anyway, the M119 came in two different sizes, and Mercedes realized that if they put shorter connecting rods in it, the 5-liter could be made to have the same external dimensions as the 4.2-liter, which meant that Porsche's engineering could be used for two models. The first would be the 400e, designed for the American market to compete against another car with 400 in its name. Yeah, the Lexus LS400. The second model was aimed right at Munich, with the full-fat 5-liter to banish the sports sedan that had been giving Mercedes Autobahn agita for years, the BMW M5. This big-bore, short-stroke, all-aluminum V8 is a masterpiece. The block is decades old, but the heads were all new, with 4 valves per cylinder, 4 camshafts, and variable valve timing. It made supercar power. But there was a problem. A big, fat problem. To complement all that power, Mercedes gave the 500e suspension, wheel, and brake components from the heavier and wider SL. To fit that stuff, the 500e got 2.2 inches of delicious, gorgeous, finger-licking fender flares. And now it was so fat it didn't fit down its own production line at the Mercedes plant. Once again, Porsche to the rescue. The factory that had been building the 959 supercar was sitting empty, and so Mercedes paid Porsche again, this time to build the 500e. Mercedes would ship over a 300e body in white, which Porsche would then modify to fit the V8. It sent the reinforced body back over to Mercedes for paint. If it was to be a narrow-bodied 400e, it would continue down the production line at Mercedes. If it was to be a 500e, it would be trucked back to a different plant at Porsche along with a big box of parts. Then Porsche would assemble it all into a car and send it back to Mercedes again for final inspection and delivery. This absurd process took 18 days, and it is one of the reasons this thing was so expensive. In 1992, it cost $89,000. That was 35% more than a BMW M5, and in today's terms, that's nearly Bentley money for a compact. The outrageously hot Audi RS2 wagon was built in the same factory, which meant for a short time you could actually see Mercedes's and Audi's coming out of the same Porsche factory together. But while the RS2 was genuinely a Porsche-Audi collaboration, the 500e wasn't. Everyone wants to believe that the 500e was a Porsche sports sedan, but the only Porsche part on it is the battery cover, which has a sticker on it from a supplier saying that Porsche bought it from them. Look, Porsche did the engineering to bolt parts from one Mercedes model onto another Mercedes model. Porsche didn't use any of its own parts, and from all I can tell, had no hand in tuning any of them. But here's the thing, Mercedes didn't need any help. Just about every magazine article declared the 500e the best car in the world. Automobile said it 3 times in one article. Car and Driver had literally no complaints other than the price. I agree. This is a car from back when Mercedes engineers outranked Mercedes accountants. And that means that a Mercedes would be priced based on what it cost to engineer and then produce, not the other way around. That's why they say, and they really used to mean, that a Mercedes-Benz is engineered like no other car in the world. Because it was. Its recirculating ball steering is more talkative than any modern cars, Porsche and Ferrari included. The engine is a torquey, revvy, acoustical masterpiece. The structure feels as stiff as anything today. The interior is perfect. Okay, it's not perfect. It starts out in second gear unless you boot it, and then the traction control hates burnouts. But both of those things can be fixed. So effectively what we have here is the best compact sedan in the world, upgraded with 4 Recaro bucket seats, flared fenders, and a Le Mans winning V8 under its hood. But no Le Mans speeds, because the 500e was electronically limited to 156 miles an hour, as per the gentleman's agreement between BMW and Mercedes. But I've heard people say all over the world this car will do 178 miles an hour if you just remove the limiter. No. It will require hardware changes for a 500e to go faster than 156, and that's because Mercedes chose a final drive ratio such that the engine is at its 6,000 RPM redline when the car is at its 156 mile an hour top speed. To go any faster, you need longer gears. But by choosing the short gear ratio, it decimated fuel economy. Ironic, given that the 124 was originally designed for fuel economy, but it means that Mercedes never sacrificed acceleration in the name of MPGs. And so, despite only 4 gears and a slush box, the 500e hit 60 miles an hour in 5.5 seconds, blasted through the quarter mile at 101 miles an hour, and left the E34 BMW M5 for dead. And not just in a straight line, the Mercedes outbraked and outcornered the M car too. The 500e and the E500, as it was badged in its final year, have gotten a lot more enthusiast attention than any of the big motored Benzes that came before it. And I don't think it's because it was touched by the hands of Porsche. So was the 400e, and you don't care about that car. No, I think it's for 3 reasons. Number 1, this is not a full-size luxury car. It's a compact car. It's the size of today's Honda Civic. 2, the 6.3 and 6.9 were basically cushy luxury sedans with a jetpack strapped to the back. This was a comprehensive rethink of a luxury car with intergalactic power that had handling to match. And 3, the 500e is a W124. And the 124 has a well-earned reputation at being perhaps the best engineered, best proportioned, best designed, longest-lasting sedan of all time. They say it takes a village, and in the case of the 500e, it took Mercedes brainpower, an Italian design, American fuel economy regs, Japanese competition, and then Porsche's engineering. So it took more than just a village. It took half the world, including 2 car companies that were in the same village. But all of those forces came together to create what was certainly then, and probably still is today, the world's most perfect sedan. Okay, so you're just gonna keep the Ferrari framed out the entire time, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Action.
I'm not some rich YouTuber asking you to like and subscribe. Hey, up, keep the Ferrari out. I'm an automotive journalist asking you to like and subscribe. And that's because that's how YouTube works. If you don't click those buttons, YouTube doesn't know you liked what you've just seen and isn't gonna show you any more of it. And if you don't like what you've just seen, well, join the club. And by that, I mean the Haggerty Drivers Club, which gets you access to this award-winning magazine, as well as discounts on amazing stuff. And if you still don't like what you've seen, well, then just leave a nasty comment, because that's how the internet works. I need to go clean that up.